Welcome back to the virtual roundtable series here at GlocalNet. We're excited that you have chosen to watch this resource with us. Here's a quick update on the virtual roundtable series. We're going to start doing them once a month, so mark your calendars for every first Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. We'll go live on Facebook and on YouTube to continue to bring topics that pastors want to hear, your church members want to hear. So please mark your calendars and make sure to check our schedule of who's going to be the next speaker for that. But today we have Daniel Darling, formerly of the ERLC. Now he has written many best-selling books, including his most recent one called Away with Words, Biblical Wisdom to Social Media Conversations. And man, do we need that more than ever right now. With the hostile social media world and what's going on in 2020, we need insights on how to better respond and how to show the love of Jesus through our social media conversations and how to lead congregations through that topic as well. So we're so excited that you joined us today. Just a quick reminder, a new resource called the Bold Love Podcast with Bob Roberts Jr. is now live. We have several episodes available right now, including our first one with Imam Muhammad Majid, our second one with Dr. Russell Moore, and our upcoming one on this recording, Hamza Yusuf. So Bob really just goes on and tells stories of his journey of bridge building and peacemaking and who he's met along the way. And it's really hilarious and also insightful and a lot of wisdom in there as well. So you don't want to miss the Bold Love Podcast. You can download the episodes today on any of the podcast providers. Just use your preferred one, or you can go to bobrobertsjr.com. That's bobrobertsjr.com/podcast, and all the episodes will be there for you to watch. So thank you for joining us today. If you want to connect with us here at GlocalNet, you can go to glocal.net. Fill out the form. We'd love to talk to you if you're a pastor or church planter to just get connected with us. So without further ado, here we go. Daniel Darling and Pastor Bob Roberts Jr.
Hi, I'm Bob Roberts, and welcome to another virtual roundtable series event put on by GlocalNet. And I am excited today to have a friend of mine for the last few years called Dan Darling be with us. Now, many of you know who Dan is. For years, he was at ERLC and worked with Russell Moore and did some incredible things there. And recently, he became vice president at the National Religious Broadcasters Association. And there's no one who knows more, writes more than Public Square. And Dan, at GlocalNet, one of the things that we try to do is to teach pastors and everyday followers of Jesus is, what does it mean to live in the public square? And what does it mean to talk about your faith? And I think the public square has changed dramatically. Used to, it was a few influential people that would unofficially talk about things in the domains of society, and they would make projections as things would come, and actually had the ability to make their prophecies come true, if you will, because they were leaders in education and business and government and literature. But now the public square, I believe, has become almost everyone. And it's not about a few people, and it's not about quiet gatherings. It's about Twitter. It's about Facebook. Everyone is everywhere, and everyone can be heard. And so everyone is contributing to these public conversations. And so the whole world is listening. And so how do we do that? I mean, constantly I'm telling preachers, guys, when you tweet, just keep in mind, non-Christians see your tweet. Keep in mind what you say is building a mental image about yourself. And you just wrote this incredible book that I enjoyed, Away with Words. I encourage you to pick it up. We bought a few copies around here, and we've been reading it and passing it around. I'm excited about it. And we just had to get you on here to talk about it. You didn't call us, we called you because we wanted you here. So tell me a little bit about your journey into the public square, into words, into how we talk and all of this.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Bob. I love talking to you, whether it's online or offline, and just love the work that you're doing. And it's just, you have this infectious enthusiasm for what you're doing, which I love.
Thanks.
You know, it's interesting. I've always been, you know, I was kind of a weird kid in the sense that I I was always a reader. When my family, when all the other kids are out doing whatever, playing and stuff, I'm in. My parents got 3 newspapers delivered every day in Chicago, and I read all of them since I was like 5. I know it's a little weird.
Wow.
Sports section first, and then the regular, and then the news. I've always loved keeping up with the news. I listened to the radio. We didn't have a TV. I cared about. It's interesting. I've always had a love for 2 things. I've always loved the church. I mean, I've always loved the church. I've been going to church my whole life, 42 years. Cannot wait for Sundays. I love the church. I love Christian ministry. And I've always loved the public square. I love this country. I love politics. Like my idea of leisure is reading a presidential biography or something. And I've always loved those 2 things. And I've always loved words. I've been a writer since I was, I had a junior high teacher. They called it junior high back then. Now it's middle school. But, I was in the middle of like English composition, and I had turned in some writing stuff. And she said to me, I think you're pretty good at this. You should keep doing it. And those words actually set the course of my life. Because when you're, how it is, when you're a chunky middle school kid with bad glasses and you're a little awkward, you're not athletic, when someone says, hey, here's actually something you're good at, you kind of take it and run with it. And I've been a writer in some form or fashion my whole life, and it's interesting. I've always worked with words. So whether I'm writing, whether I'm preaching and pastoring or working communications for an organization, or hosting a podcast or doing radio. I mean, it's funny. I talk to my wife frequently, and I just say, like, people pay me for words. It's really weird.
Now you just said something interesting in those words. You said, I talk to my wife frequently.
Yes.
That's interesting. You talk to your wife frequently, not infrequently, but frequently.
Yes.
Is there a formula for that?
I mean, it helps to talk to your wife frequently.
I'm teasing you.
If you want to stay married. I've been married 18 years, so yes.
I'm proud
I
of
do
you.
talk frequently. And sometimes she's talking to me and I'm listening. You know what I mean?
So sometimes, I like the way you said that. You're a wordsmith. Sometimes my wife is talking to me and I'm listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you one of these guys with a dry sense of humor?
Yeah, I can be very sarcastic. And I actually think sarcasm, if you read in the Bible, there's some sarcasm there. Elijah, the prophets of Baal and stuff. So that's
my son would love you. You and him need to go round and round. He's your age, and he's the master of that.
Yeah.
That's
I'd
cool.
love to meet him. That'd be cool. Yeah. So, I mean, this is just something I've been thinking about, the public square and ministry. And I really do think they go together. I've always been interested in helping Christians think through how to live out your faith, how to apply the gospel to the public square.
You just said something, I think, super important. The church and the public square, man, I agree with you. They do go together.
Yeah.
But I never realized that. I was raised, no, you don't have anything to do with the public square. And if you did have something to do with the public square, you were holding a poster against abortion.
Yeah.
That was it. The public square was protest. There's nothing about how do you talk. Why do you think that was? Why do you think that is with a lot of people?
Well, I mean, I think, it's complicated. It's interesting. Evangelicals have always been involved in the public square. If you think about it, even going back to like the 19th century and early 20th century, when you think about the temperance movements. I just finished a great biography of William Jennings Bryan, and it's amazing how evangelicals were kind of populist, but they were, against alcohol. I mean, there's always been I think the gospel really always compels you to just go out and try to make the world better. I mean, Jesus said, for us to love our neighbor as ourselves, that's kind of woven throughout the Bible. And if we are to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we live in a representative republic like we do, where we have a vote and we have our voices, there are people that kind of want us to withdraw. But I say, how do you tell your unborn neighbor? How do you tell your immigrant neighbor? How do you tell your Muslim neighbor that you could have used your voice to speak up for them, but you didn't. I don't think that. So I think to fully love our neighbors, we have to do. The other thing is Romans 13 talks about the accountability that God gives to um, governments. And we typically read that as, okay, those who are in power are going to be held accountable. But the truth is, in a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we share in that power. So we'll be held accountable too for kind of what society we have. So, and yet I also think there's a strain of activism that can just only be activism and only doing justice stuff without a gospel thread to it. And that just gets wearying. And I think people get frustrated when they put all their faith in the next election, all their faith in the next movement. And I see this on the right and the left, that there's a kind of constant pressure and despair at the state of the world, and an activism and a justice that when you don't have the gospel hope that in Christ, that he is making us for us a better world, that he has conquered sin, death, and the grave, and we're just part of the movement, that part of the work he's already doing. I think when you lose that, you get a kind of, I got to save the world mentality that gets really exhausting. And this is why I think you see a lot of vitriol and a lot of anger, because activism goes from, I'm speaking up for this vulnerable person, to, I'm going to crush everyone who doesn't exactly agree with me on this. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's huge. Where I started getting into the public square in a big sort of way when I started working with Muslims around the world.
Yeah.
And there was no plan for that. And
Yeah.
I wasn't ready for it. And I didn't know how to respond to it. And it's only increased in my life. And now there's many things that I'm in the public square for. But one of the things that I discovered was I really had to be careful what I said, like humor and jokes.
Yeah.
I'd be horsing around. Well, that may be fine in one context, but in the public square, you joke around in the wrong way, man, you're dead.
Yeah.
And even if you make fun of yourself, I mean, you've got to, how do you deal with that? How do you know what to say? How far to push? How far to take?
I think we just, this has been a difficult few years, right? For Christians, for evangelicals, because of, the politics and how hard it is. And, I've thought about it. After 2016, I really evaluated, okay, how am I doing this? Am I doing this well? And, there's a whole group of people that I might not even thought of and forgotten. And I like the way that you engage, in the sense that one of the things I like about you, Bob, is that you just call it like it is. So if the president does something really good, you do not hesitate to say, hey, this is really great.
Yeah.
If he does something that is bad, you say this isn't good. And, I think we need to do a politics where we can see the good in the other person we disagree with, and try to persuade. We're going to have deep disagreements. Can we still see the humanity of the other person? I talk to people like this. I've got people in my life who love this president and think he's, one of the best in the modern era. And I go round and round with them, and I disagree with them, but I still love them, and they're good people, and they're probably better than I am. I've got people in my life who loathe this president and think he is the worst we've ever had and cannot wait to see him out. And they're better people than I am. And I go round and round with them, and I agree with them some ways and I disagree with some ways, but I still love them, and I think we've lost the ability to do that. And I think we've lost the ability to do like I've seen you do, where, okay, I disagree with this person on this, and that issue, but here's a sliver of things I can work with him on.
Yeah.
Or her on. And I'm not going to let this cloud this, especially when it comes to the public square, right? I mean, I also think.
Well, you cancel yourself.
Yes,
with cancel culture, we think, we'll show them, we'll let them have it. But the reality, whatever side you agree with, you have just isolated yourself from that side.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think,
exactly right.
Since Clinton, I've worked with different administrations on different things.
Yeah.
You won't find a lot of pictures of me with presidents and stuff. I've met them and stuff like that, but the focus is the work.
What I like, though, Bob, that you do, you'll go to the White House. Doesn't matter who the president is. If there's an issue that you can talk about, and you'll go to Congress and you'll talk to these people. And it's funny. I don't think I have voted for the last three presidents, or two presidents at least. And yet I always try to say, okay, they won. I'm praying for their success.
Yeah.
And
It's our success, isn't it?
what are some ways that I can see that they're doing good? I didn't agree with President Obama on a lot of stuff, but I also did some good things. And when he did, I tried to commend it. I don't like Trump's personality and the way he approaches stuff and in terms of his demeanor and his, and I think he's made a lot of mistakes, but he's also done some really good things. And so can we not see that? And I think we've lost the ability to do that. The other thing, Bob, is this. When I read First Peter, it talks about being strangers and exiles. And I think if we're strangers and exiles, we're citizens of God's kingdom, we're never going to be at home in any earthly movement. So I do think we should join movements. I think people should join parties and people should try to build institutions. But there should always be a dissonance between our movement and the kingdom of God, where we're part of this, but there's a part of it that makes us uncomfortable and there's a check. That's good. If we don't feel that, I think maybe we're giving that movement an allegiance that we shouldn't, right? So if you're a Republican and you say, these are the issues I care about, I'm going to try to be part of this party and influence it this certain way, that's fine. That's great. But always there should be a kind of a gap between the Republican Party and the kingdom of God. And if you don't feel that, maybe one's part of the other. And I would say the same thing about being a Democrat. If you say, I land here because of these issues, and I'm going to try to influence the party here, but there should always be a gap there. And if not, you know what I'm saying? We're making that our allegiance instead of the kingdom of God. So I think we do need to be involved, but also hold it loosely, right?
So what do you do when somebody, let's say you tweet something, you challenge a policy, somebody comes back at you, they attack you.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that? Do you ignore it? Do you respond to it? What do you do?
I mean, that's a good question. I first think we have to think, okay, I'm going to say this about this thing. What am I trying to do here? Am I really trying to speak out? Well, that's great. I think we should do that. How can I word it so it won't be misunderstood?
Yeah.
Because I think if we have the mentality, I just want to own the other side. Let's crush them. Well, okay. You get some temporary satisfaction, but is that really doing anything in the long run? But I do need to speak out on this. Try to do it in a way that try to understand where people are coming from. And then I think when people come back at you, I think you can have a conversation. See, I think you can have disagreements online and have conversations, but we have to remember a couple things. Number one, we're in public. We forget we're in public. So yeah. I think we should imagine ourselves on a debate stage. And if I was on a debate stage, we would have disagreements, but there'd be a kind of common dignity there, and we would respect each other. So number one, remember we're in public. And I really wish pastors and leaders, remember you are in public. People are watching. And I think number two, can I remember the humanity of the person I'm disagreeing with? So I may think they're wrong. I may think they're crazy, but they're a human being. And I think number three, I think you should only have arguments or disagreements if people are doing this in good faith, right? So if there's a good faith push and pull, that's wonderful. There are some people, look, we're in a fallen world, right? So there's a lot of people that just, or not a lot, but there's a few people that just don't argue in good faith. Yeah. They're trolls. And I don't know that you should waste your time arguing with people that are just never going to come at you in good faith. You just kind of have to ignore it. Otherwise, you get pulled down into it. And after a while, you're like, why did I even do this? And this wasn't helpful. Does that make any sense?
It does. What do you do? I mean, sometimes I'll read my Twitter feed, or just the main feed, what's going on. And I want to respond to this and I want to respond to that. And maybe I don't even know that much about that, but I've got this view. I've got that view. And I found myself at one point going, say, Bob, you don't have to respond to everything.
That's exactly right.
Why do you have to say something?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a couple things I want to say. You don't have to respond to everybody. Number two, and I wish people understood this, we don't have to have opinions about everything all the time.
Yeah.
There's this weird thing that I've got to say something. And people will say that too. And it drives me crazy when people say evangelical leaders are silent. And it's like, no, they're not silent. They're just not as mad as you are at the same time as you are about the same issue as you are on the same medium as you are.
Yeah.
For all we know, Tim Keller's not tweeting about it because he's talking to his elders about it, right? So like this pull that you have to have an opinion on everything. 20 years ago, Bob, we didn't have these mediums. 20 years ago, no one cared what a pastor or some random guy 5 states away cared about some global crisis.
Yeah.
So this idea we have to have an opinion, I think it's good to speak out, but I think let's make sure we get all the information. Let's know what we're talking about. Maybe wait a day to let the story play out and then say something, right? We like to jump the gun or just read the headline, not read the whole story. We get worked up. And then a day later, it's like, none of this was even true or half of this was true. You know what I mean?
Are you concerned about the polarization that's in our country right now?
Yeah, I really am. I mean, it's, look, we've always had a healthy back and forth in the United States. I mean, if you read history, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams savaged each other in that election. We had a civil war, we've had the 60s, but I am nervous about it, the polarization and the tribalization for a couple of reasons. One, I think, David Brooks has a great way of putting it. There's a difference between community and tribalization. Yeah. Community is good. We're wired for community as Christian. I mean, as human beings, God has wired human beings to be joiners. We should join associations and clubs. And as Christians, we're part of the body of Christ. We join a local church. But Brooks says that tribalization is the dark twin of community. It means we're not joining groups for shared ideas and shared interests. We're joining them for shared hatreds. So
how do you overcome that?
I'm part of this group because I hate this group.
Right.
And we kind of live with these walls and this echo chamber where we don't want to hear anything else. And I think we got to try to resist that. We got to try to learn from a wide variety of people. We got to read news from a variety of perspectives. Have friends.
What news do you read? What do you read?
I try to read from a variety. I try to read some mainstream coverage. I try to read Christian news sources. I like World Magazine. I'll read Christianity Today has good coverage. I'll read some Fox stuff. I'll read some CNN. I like the Dispatch with David French and those guys because one of the things I like, they're conservative, but they really try to get the facts right. And okay, here's what's going on. Increasingly too, there's these long form ways of kind of reading and getting information, newsletters and podcasts that are just, I feel like whoever's writing the headlines is writing them so that people click on them and get scared, right? And everything is a crisis. Every single thing is a big deal, right? And I also think we have to regulate our news diet. Like, I don't think we were made, Bob, to take intake of 24/7 crisis and horribleness. I just don't think we're wired for that.
I agree with you.
Local news too. I'm increasingly in this pandemic, I've been reading a lot of local news.
Me too.
And I just feel like those guys are closer to the ground a lot of times. They're trying to get the story right. They don't have an agenda. I don't know if you found that too.
No, I have. I love it. I went through a phase 30 years ago when I was starting to work globally and doing some things. I had to do a lot of learning. And I once heard this guy say that people reinforce what they already believe, especially through forms of media that reinforce that. And you look at it today, there are very few neutral sources. It's like I'll listen to CNN, I listen to Fox. I want to hear because I know what I'm going to hear at both of those, but I want to hear how they're positioning it. I like BBC. Sometimes I think they're going to give a little bit more. I'm biased.
Yeah.
I love The Economist.
Me
I like
too.
The Atlantic. I know it can be a little bit more liberal, but I like some of the people that write there. So
Yeah.
I want to, I don't know. I want to hear what everybody's saying and think about it. I just don't want to reinforce. And I think that's why we have become tribal as we are. We've got our platitudes. We've got our positions. Here's the news sources you can trust. And really what a lot of people who say that mean is, here are the people that are saying what I'm saying. I want you to listen to them. And they sit behind a news desk. And I think, that those guys and gals that do that, it ticks me off
Yeah.
because they're supposed to be journalists and they're not. They're fighting for ratings, and I think it
Yeah.
hurts
And
us.
what disillusions me too is I expect that from places that I know are slanted or have a certain slant opinion. I get frustrated when people who are purportedly journalists, just straight down the middle, just kind of everything kind of seems slanted. Everything kind of seems, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I follow them on Twitter and I see them becoming more advocates than journalists. And it's just a little bit, but I do think we have to just be open to say, I'm willing to read bad news about my guy or the people that I like. And I'm willing to read good things about the people that I don't like, right? So we tend to want to believe this is how conspiracy theories spread. This is how misinformation spread. So if you don't like Trump and you think he's bad, you're going to believe and read any headline or anything that shows him in a bad light. Any freakish, and there's a lot of stuff. If you don't like the Democrats right now, if you don't like Joe Biden, you're going to read everything that says everything about him. And I think we just have to ask ourselves as Christians, is this true? And why do I want this to be true? Like, I can believe what I believe, and I can advocate for the things I care about. I don't have to, I have a phrase in there that God doesn't need our fake news to do his work in the world. Like, I don't have to make up stuff about people. I can just advocate in a way that God has wanted me to. And can I see the good in people I might not vote for, right? Can I see any good in them? Can I work with them? Can I respect certain things about them, right? I mean, why can't we do that?
Yeah. You write a chapter in here that I really enjoyed, and it was the internet for good. I like that a lot. Talk to us a little bit about that. How do we use social media and all of that for good?
Yeah, I mean, look, Twitter and Facebook and all that can be a hellscape and it could be awful, but it can also be wonderful. It could be great. I mean, and we have to understand, we live in the 21st century and God is not up in heaven saying, oh my goodness, what did I do? I let them have social media. Like, we're not going to go back to the 1950s. We're not going to all become Amish. So here we are. How do we steward this well? And as negative as it can be in a fallen world, I think it could be enormous good. A lot of the people I know and things, articles and books and content that's formed me and shaped me and helped me learn. I've learned from social, following people and book recommendations and conferences. I don't know if I know who Bob Roberts is if there's no Twitter, if there's no stuff online. Maybe I pick up your book, and I have read your books. You know what I'm saying? And I think of the way my faith has been shaped. There's also enormous opportunity for good. I mean, a friend of mine was killed in a tragic accident a month ago in Texas, and he was a pastor in Houston.
John Pollock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we raised a lot of money for his widow. And it's amazing, Bob. People that didn't know him were giving $50, $100, $500 because of the story.
Wow.
So there's a lot of good. I also think of the way Bible translations happen right now because of technology. If you've ever gone to the Museum of the Bible, you have that wall where it shows how many people have the Bible in their language and then how many don't. But because of technology, they're able to speed up the pace of translations, and different translation ministries work together. I mean, you think about the technology that's helping combat the pandemic and how we're able to do all this stuff. The fact that we can shut a lot of things down and still, have school, and we can still have church and stuff. So I also think too about this, Bob, and I don't know if you've given this thought. A lot of churches are regathering now, which is really fantastic. But for a while there, every church was online and using Facebook Live or streaming. And so the gospel, the good news is going out across the world. And we don't even know, Bob, how many people stumbled across a church service or a thing and just, you know what I mean? We won't know till we get to heaven. We're also able to learn more about the world, about people and other cultures, and learn about this wonderful globe of people, rather than just being our little corner. I mean, I can learn about that stuff. I can follow Bob Roberts as he's traipsing around the world doing all this great work.
It's this morning, it was very early call. I had to get up early to be on it, but there was a very small group of us, global pastors. These guys have millions in their movements. And here's what's exciting, Dan. The church is exploding right now.
It is.
All over the world. The pandemic has actually sped things up for it. One of the things I realized, it hit me one day, and this is why I guess I tell pastors this. In the early days, I really did tweet for Christians. And then I realized as I keep going and I'm speaking at secular events or, World Economic Forum or stuff like that, there's a whole new set of followers that I've wound up having. And I love Matt Chandler. I'll never be a Matt Chandler. He's just phenomenal in my book as a young pastor. I'm never going to have the followers or whatever. But guess what? Because of my life and where I live my life, I'm going to have some very unique followers. And it hit me one day. It doesn't matter that I may never be the preacher that Matt Chandler is. I have the opportunity to share the gospel with people on social media that'll listen, that are never going to listen to anyone else simply because they know me. And I think sometimes I go, guys, who do you know that don't know Jesus? And what's your tweet threads for those guys? And what are you tweeting out every day for non-believers and what they believe about Jesus? And I think it's fun. I've got a lot of Muslims that follow me now.
That's great.
It cracks me up when they retweet my Christian verses or my theology verses.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and that's so true, Bob. I mean, if you were on Twitter, you would just think the church is failing, everything's terrible.
Yeah.
The evangelical church is going down. And look, there are needed critiques of the church. There are issues in the church. There are alignment with politics in ways that are bad and all that. But I read this every day, these people every day, just, I'm going to, do this. And I'm thinking, people who are watching this, would they know that there's any good news about Jesus? Would they know why you believe what you believe, why you're passionate about this? And I like what you said, that the church is on the move. And the one lie I think that, evangelical social media, particularly Twitter, and I think Twitter is more the elites and Facebook is more the masses. Does that make sense? And so one of the lies I think is that God is not at work today, that he was only at work in previous days. There's so much problem, so much racism, so much this and that God, and the truth is God is at work in 2020, just like he was in every other age. And so I love what you're saying there. The other way to use the internet for good too, Bob, is just for us to say, how can I use my platform, whatever I have, whatever God's given me, to bring joy? So whose voices can I elevate? Whose books and articles can I put out there? Whose music or art? Who can I encourage? Sometimes, in the last few months I've been trying to do this. Sometimes I'll go on Twitter and I'll just say, I'll read through and I'll say, who am I going to encourage? If someone puts a nice,
I like that.
nice post, or if they put an article or a book, just to say, man, this is really good, or this is really great. And, it doesn't have to be bad. Social media can be really good if we allow it to be, and we bring joy to it.
That's good. What would you say to somebody who's just blown it on social media and they regret it and they go, man, I shouldn't have said that. That I blew it.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I mean, I think first, if you make a public mistake, apologizing publicly is good. And look, it takes a lot to apologize. But I think people will respect you. Not everyone will. People will still use it against you. A couple years ago, when I was at ERLC, we published something we shouldn't have published. it slipped through our editorial process somehow. We had a great team and we published so much stuff, and one thing slipped through, like it happens, right? And so I put out a public apology for it, and people respected that. I distinctly remember one time in 2016, I was tweeting about politics, and I was doing it in a much more aggressive way than I would do now. I've really learned a lot since then. And I had a Christian leader that you would know text me and say, "Did you really mean to say this? Like, this is how it's being read and how it's being heard. And I think you may want to rethink this." And it was a wake-up call to say, okay, what am I doing here? What am I doing? And so I think if you blow it, you just apologize. I mean, I lament the kind of culture now where if someone gets famous, we look up what they tweeted when they were 13. These poor college, these draft picks in the NFL, the best day of their life, they're shaking the commissioner's hand. And some journalist with nothing else to do, here's what they tweeted 15 years ago, and to embarrass them, which I hate that. People change and grow. Yeah. On the flip side, I do tell people, once it's online, it's pretty, it's permanent. So we want to be wise about that. But people grow and change. And so I don't think we should judge people by the tweets they had 10 years ago, right? And especially this generation. I'm nervous about the Generation Z just because everything they think they post, which is fine, except in 15 years when you're being nominated for some position and you're before Congress, someone's going to dig that tweet up, or you're trying to get a job or something. So, we need to be discerning about what we tweet because it can come back to bite us. But people are going to blow it. People are going to make mistakes,
Anything for churches, the church Twitter account, the church Facebook page, Instagram, anything you'd say, hey, here's 2 or 3 things for churches they ought to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'll have 2 or 3 things for churches and 2 or 3 things for pastors. Churches I think should be really smart, and really just try to push out content that's relevant to the church. Always be thinking the thing we have to think is, how will this play in public? What are ways this could be misunderstood? A quote, a clip could easily be misunderstood out of context. It's sad we have to think that, but you really do. Like you got to read the room in some ways, particularly Twitter, where people can be just vicious. I don't like the idea of brands getting all political. And I know that's a trend now with various brands weighing in and getting, I think it's just kind of a weird look. I think churches need to be careful about that. And just think, how will this play online? How will my people misunderstand this? Will people misunderstand? Now, when it comes to pastors, I have some tips too. I think there's ways that, when I am encouraging someone to look for a church, you obviously look at their church website and you figure out what do they believe, and you talk to people. But I also want to look at the pastor's social media. If the pastor is a troll, if he's constantly dogging people and finding the bad things in people, or if the pastor, I think pastors need to be careful of trying to be a pundit instead of a pastor. Yeah. If I read your tweets and you're a senior pastor and everything is like Fox News punditry, there's a role for a pundit, but you're a shepherd, right? And if that's all I see, I'm thinking, man, is that what I'm going to get on Sunday? On the flip side, if I read your Twitter and all it is anti-Fox News stuff or anti-evangelical stuff or liberal stuff, I'm so I think we have to be careful about that. And I think also pastors, leaders, generally, my thing is leaders need to really be wise about the way they use Twitter. I think James 3 speaks to this, where James talks about the weight of leadership and how our words can either give life or death. What leaders do in moderation, they give their followers will do in excess.
Boy, that's a good point.
What leaders will do on, in terms of the way they interact, they're giving permission to their followers. So if you're a pastor or a Christian leader and you're just very careless online and everything, it's just really, it's not good. I think leaders should engage and be part of this, but they have to be really wise about how they do it and how they're being, we're in public. I think we forget we're in public. So there's things you would not get up in a pulpit and say. And yet you sort of do this online. So I think we have to be careful. Does that make sense? I think you can really hurt the organization you work for if a pastor or leader is careless this way.
Dan, I've actually, Southern Baptist, and I've actually been amazed at how at different times there's been groups of Southern Baptist pastors that would come together for issues on Twitter and other social media. Mm-hmm. I mean, they'd be trashing another group and we're going to do this and we're doing that. I'm stunned by that. Yeah. I'm going, you can't be serious. And I wonder sometimes, what are their churches like? How can you be that angry all the time and against everybody, and nothing's ever happy, and
it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Bob, too, that when you look at the requirements for Christian leaders that Paul gives Timothy and Titus, we focus on the moral questions, which we should. That we should not lessen that focus. Is he faithful to his wife? Is she, are these people in a... But in every qualification, you see also gentleness, kindness, not a brawler, not given to not quarrelsome, not given to foolish controversies. That's also disqualifying. And like you said, sometimes I look and I say, where are these elders to rein this guy in? This is not the way to lead a church. I think it's great that pastors engage online and even speak up on issues, because they're pastoring and they're trying to pastor. But I think we always need to do it remembering we're shepherds. So like, how would I say this to my people in a way that they would understand? And, Twitter incentivizes, and Facebook too, everyone kind of seeing themselves as this prophet, that everyone getting up in the morning and looking in the mirror and seeing Martin Luther at the Diet of Worms, or, Jeremiah. And so I'm right and everyone else is wrong. And I think before you can be prophetic, you have to be shepherding. That's people are not going to listen to your prophetic words if you haven't first shepherded them. My pastor, Daryl Crouch, who I think
I love him. He's a great guy.
Daryl can say just about anything to our people. You know why? Because he's been there. And when we know that he cares about us, we know that he loves us, that he's been you have to earn the right to be prophetic. And I think that's what a lot of young guys miss, that, I'm going to get out of seminary and I'm just going to tell everybody how it is. I'm going to change the church and everybody's wrong. And it's like, hold on a second. The shepherding has to come first, I think, before the prophetic. And there's a fine line there where you're pushing people. But also, a lot of times I read people and I just see a lot of condescension, a lot of elitism, a lot of, I'm better than you. And, like the Pharisee in the temple that says, I'm so glad I'm not like that other tax collector, that person. That's a lot of times what Christians are doing on Twitter, saying, man, I'm so glad I'm not like these other Christians. I'm over here. And the truth is, as we know as Christians, that the gospel tells us that we are like those other Christians. I'm no better than those people, and I need salvation just like they do.
We're related to them.
Yeah.
I want to encourage you, Away with Words, Dan Darling. Get this book. You're going to love it. You're going to enjoy it. It'd be a great book to take your small group through. It'd be a great book to give to your pastor. So I just encourage you to grab it. Dan, I'm grateful for you. Let's go on a trip together.
Let's do it.
Out real big, and we'll go some crazy place. Can you run good?
I can, man. I'm ready to go with you.
We'll have.
I think it'd be great. And whenever we can start traveling again, I'm all in, man. Your ministry is infectious, and I just love what I love about what you do, and what I really would like to model after is you have strong disagreements with people. But you will work with people, and you'll work with anybody that the Lord puts in your pathway in order to achieve something. And I think that's a really great model.